Hey everybody, wanted to take a few minutes here. In this past video, I shared my story and part of my suffering as well in a prior video, and what it looked like for me to seek God. And to be clear, for you guys who have kind of followed some of my stories and videos, my journey was not like clean in the sense of, oh, it's like, oh, that was simple. It took a few weeks, but yeah, man, I really got out of that mess really easily. For me, and just looking back, it was like literally clawing my way out of darkness. Like it was, there were mistakes along the way. I shared some of my, me seeking out my own idols, and particularly in the realm of psychological medicines. Um, those were things that I sought out for saving. And there were other mistakes I made along the way as well. So I don't want any of you to think oh, well, it's going to be clean. It's not going to be clean. I mean, we're in the battle for our souls, and in particular in the realm of mental illness, where I've shared in a recent Facebook post on the Jesus Heals Mental Illness page that uh, God is in the business of saving people and really saving people so that it is seen that he's the only one that gets the glory. Like we see in the gospel accounts as Jesus is interacting with people, like with the blind man, when the blind man who hadn't seen since he had ever, he was born blind, and then he saw, nobody else could take the credit for that. God took the credit for that, and God got the glory in saving. And so when you look at throughout the Gospels, we see that picture where it's like a miracle has to happen, and a miracle does happen, and God does these miracles so that he alone gets the glory. That's in the first century. Fast forward to the 21st century, there are very few areas to where God can, in the public's eye, where the public would say, okay, God receives the glory for that. Now, God still does physical miracles. But in particular, in this area of mental illness, when God saves somebody from mental illness, really like a genuine experience with God, like in my situation, when he saved me from mental terror, nobody else can claim credit for that. No medicines can claim credit for that. No doctors can claim credit for that. No other God, no other idol. Nobody could claim credit for saving me except God. So in order for that to happen, somebody once told me, if heaven is going to get in you, all hell will be against it. And especially in this area of mental illness, where Satan really has a stronghold and the world has so many opinions, and even many churchgoers have so many opinions of what fixes people with mental illness. So for God to get the glory, it is going to be a battle. It is going to be messy in some senses. Not that God's messy, but just the struggle of the soul getting to God, and the things the soul has to like clamor through and push out of the way. It becomes a messy journey. So I just want to kind of share that up front. But in my experience, I was able to learn a lot of things about seeking God, and I shared that in the past video. And so what I want to take a few minutes right now and talk about is what it does not mean to seek God. Like there were times in my journey where I was definitely seeking God, and when I definitely sought God, I found him and he revealed himself to me. But there were many periods of time in my journey that I was not seeking God, and I was really suffering, and it was really terrible. And that suffering leads me to seeking God because I wanted out. But there were definitely periods where I was not seeking God, even though I was suffering terribly. So I just want to share a few things of what it does not mean to seek God. Like, what are you doing when you to like make it that you're not seeking God? And so part of this is just from my experience, but then also from interacting with people as I've sought to give counsel and to minister to people who are suffering right now. So here's one of the first things I would say is that there is a big difference between self-seeking and God-seeking, or self-focus and God-focus. Whenever you're looking at yourself, you are not seeking God. What do I mean by that? Whenever you are thinking about your symptoms, whenever you're whenever you're looking at the wound, in a sense, like, if my arm were broken, if I'm just constantly staring at my arm, I'm not going to seek the healer. I'm just, because all I'm doing is looking here. That's self, in a sense, seeking. Like your eyes are turned towards yourself. Wherever you're looking, that's where you're seeking. Like that's where you're going. So whenever you're looking at your wounds and your symptoms, you're not truly seeking God. And I did this. Like I remember, and I shared in this past video, right at the beginning of my anxiety, like just when it was starting to get really bad, I had this awareness of this tingling in my feet. And the tingling was just odd, and it kept bothering me. And then I was like, man, what do I have? And so, of course, I Google tingling at the bottom of the foot, and then Google, Satan's land there is like, you got cancer, you got, all these other things. And then I just got lost in a web of fear because of tingling in my foot. And that's silly. And this is what I'm saying. It was very messy for me in my journey. But that was me looking at a symptom or thinking about a symptom. And I've found that in a lot of people I interact with is that they ask about symptoms, and then they ask me about what symptoms I had, like what things I went through and what thoughts I endured. All of that, thinking about symptoms, thinking about thoughts or what other people went through, all of that is self-seeking. It's not self-seeking like seeking gratitude. It's self-seeking as your eyes are turned within, like your eyes are looking at yourself or looking at other people. And if this is the case, in these seasons where you're doing this, where I was doing this, I was not seeking after God, as the scripture says, with all of my heart. My attention, my eyes were not turned towards him. My attention was turned towards myself. And so this is one counsel I would give. If you find yourself either looking at your symptoms or thinking about your symptoms or seeking out other people, like I know there was a season where I just wanted to look at testimonies to see like if some people were suffering just as badly as I was, if people who had been healed really went through the terror that I went through. And there's nothing wrong with looking at testimonies, but look at testimonies to see God's glory in that person, not just to say, oh, good, this person had the same symptoms as me, because that mindset, you're not seeking God. And when you're not seeking God, he has no obligation to save you. So just as an encouragement, if you find yourself in that, stop, turn, and begin to seek after God. So that's one of the areas that I was wanted to share is you're not seeking after God whenever you're looking at yourself. Now you can recognize you have these things. Like you can recognize, like if I had a broken arm, it's okay to recognize it. But the issue is not to focus on it. You need to seek the healer. And it's like the scripture says, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul thirsts after God. If the deer is thirsty, if they're just like looking at themselves saying, I'm thirsty, I'm really, really thirsty. Oh man, this is miserable. I'm thirsty. If that's all they're doing, they're never going to get to the water. They have to desperately seek, the deer desperately seeks the water to satisfy it, to quench its thirst. It's the same thing in our seeking with God. Yes, we have terrifying terrors that we're going through, and it's okay just to recognize like, okay, this is real. But there reaches a point in the journey to where though those things are ever consuming you and attacking you and you're getting hit from all angles, there reaches a point for everybody who encounters God where they're no longer focused on those things, even though they are ever present, but they're so desperate. And I use that word a lot, but that's what it is. There's a desperation to get to God, even in the midst of all the terror. And that's where you want to be. You want to be in the point where it's okay that you recognize your terrors. I mean, Jesus asked people, what is it that you want? And they said, well, I want to be healed. I want my arm to be healed. There were times where Jesus had them recognize what was wrong. So it's okay to recognize it, but just don't focus on it. So that's one of the areas I would say of what seeking God is not. So it's not looking internally at yourself. So I'm going to get to other videos here about what seeking is and what seeking is not. But that's a big area, is not looking at yourself, and it's not seeking after any other thing here on earth. It's not seeking after any other idols, any other object here on earth. It's not seeking in and of yourself to save yourself. And that's a huge thing in American intellectualism, is trying to think your way into saving yourself. Like, if I just think the right things or believe the right things, like it's me generating it. That's intellectualism, thinking that you can save yourself just by having positive thinking. Positive thinking is not salvation. It's a lie. The only one who can save, whose name is salvation, literally, is Jesus. So it's when we seek him and him alone. And that's in a desperate pursuit in the heart, a yearning, a thirsting after the water, who is Jesus Christ. So hope that helps. Just a few thoughts on what seeking is not. And then in other videos, we'll talk about what seeking is. What is God's purpose in all of this? What is he trying to get us to? So we're going to move forward into those things in these next videos. All right.